Welcome everybody to Game Bad. My name is Walker, and these are my thoughts on Atomic Heart. I admit I was skeptical about getting into Atomic Heart after some of the reviews that I saw on YouTube. There were a few kind of negative reviews that had come out right before release, so I think they were like a 2 out of 10. I know IGN had given it an early 8 out of 10. As of right now, I'm happy to say the reviews have leaned mostly positive across the board, with a 75% on both PC Gamer and Metacritic, as well as a very positive rating on Steam. I've been looking forward to this game and maybe unfairly hoping it would fill the void that I was left with after Bioshock Infinite in 2013 and various other kind of early FPS single player games that had come out around that time that were excellent. And I say unfair because that's such a harsh standard to hold any form of entertainment to. Like, is this as good as the thing that I loved 10 years ago that changed my standards for that form of media, namely Bioshock Infinite? And obviously, as I'm sure a lot of us have experienced, it's a trap that we put ourselves in. There's no way that this new thing is going to be as good as that game that you love, that gives you all of those nostalgic memories and feelings. There's no way it's going to be that good. And simply because it's not that game. If I start to get into the idea of, oh, well, this thing is going to bring back the feelings that I had about a title that I played 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, then I'm already setting myself up for judgment, right? It's really easy to get caught into that, and I'm actually really trying to look at this game objectively from just sort of a how good is this? How fun is this game? How well written are these characters? How good are the mechanics? And not trying to compare it to the thing that I loved 10 years ago, which is actually really hard. And I admit that. It's really difficult for me because that kind of was my driving hype for this game, kind of up until release. I'm going to try and look at this from a objective point of view and treat these developers fairly for the game that they created, which so far is pretty decent. For the sake of spoilers, I'm only going to be using gameplay from the early part of the game. I don't want to ruin the experience for any of you. I do think there is some merits as far as the story is concerned. It's at least interesting enough, in my opinion. But I don't want to be the one to spoil that for you. So definitely hop in and check it out for yourself. It is free with Game Pass. So if you have a Game Pass subscription on either Xbox or PC, you can download it and hop in and check it out for yourself. Atomic Heart takes place on the grounds of Facility 3826, the Soviet Union's foremost scientific research hub in an alternate history 1955. The alternate history being that after Germany's loss of World War II, the Germans released a deadly virus called the Brown Plague on their way out and devastated the world and had no cure. As a result of that, the Soviets constructed Facility 3826 to combat that virus and search for a cure. Along the way, they made significant scientific advancements and revolutionized the way people live day to day, from changing to a massively automated society, increasing an average lifespan by another 100 years, and classrooms and schools being obsolete via Collective 2.0. You play as P3, a private agent of Dr. Dmitry Sechenov, who is summoned to 3826 presumably to receive a polymer glove named Charles that accompanies him throughout the course of the game. While visiting the facility, disaster happens and P3 sets off to get to the bottom of what's happened on 3826 and hopefully escape in one piece. Facility 2836 is a stunning landscape of retro future metropolitan areas, breathtaking scientific facilities, and more than a few robots. Of all the game's missteps, the setting and the story, in my opinion, is not one of them. It's been a while actually since I've played a game with a setting this unique and thought out. Every step of the way, this game manages to be visually stunning in both its graphics and setting, and I really couldn't get enough of that. The world design itself is stunning, and I could look at it for hours and hours. With that said, I can't help but feel that the characters in the world overall were kind of a letdown. For a world that's so well realized, a lot of the characters really seem to lack a whole lot of depth, and I found myself skipping a lot of the optional dialogue, which is unusual for me. I'm somebody who doesn't do that. My wife is constantly annoyed because she likes to skip cutscenes. I will not skip cutscenes if we're playing together. It's just not It's just not what I like to do. I really like to take in the world. And for some reason, in a lot of the optional dialogue in this game, I either skipped it or just walked away from the conversations, which is interesting because actually what they had to say and the stories that they were telling were pretty okay, at least in my opinion. I thought they were interesting enough. It actually kind of comes down to the performances, at least for me personally. Now, that's not to say that the voice actors who did this are at fault for that. Maybe the emotions of the scene weren't conveyed well at the time of the recording. Maybe the context wasn't given properly, so the voice actor really didn't know what they were supposed to be delivering. There's a lot of factors that play into that. I just can't help but feel that it doesn't grab in the way that I was hoping for or that they were intending. Now, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit with my next statement because I know that the main character of this game has been a little bit divisive as far as, how people feel about him and where he sits in the world. But I actually didn't find him as unlikable as some of the other reviews that I've watched on it. There's no doubt that his character is a typical action hero who doesn't know how to use swear words and gets angry when his shoe comes untied. And his dialogue within the first like 4 or 5 hours drove me insane with how basic it was. But he kind of grew on me over time. After a while, I started to think that the devs knew full well how goofy the character was and just kind of started leaning into it. Like, why change it now? We're in too deep. He's kind of funny because he's just always angry. That's just my opinion, but there you have it. He's nothing to write home about. He's not going to live amongst the greatest main characters of gaming, but I think he sort of fits. He sort of fits in the space that he's intended for, and I'm fine with that. Just don't expect anything to write home about. Overall, I actually think the story is worth sticking around for. There's a lot of conspiracy and nuance to how these characters are sort of affiliated with each other, and it's actually pretty good. I'm not going to bring any of that up. I'm going to let you play that. That's not why I'm here. I'm just going to tell you I do think the story is kind of worth sticking around for. It at least like kind of carries you through the game. I don't think it's going to revolutionize how these games are made, but I think it's worth sticking around for. It fits within the world, in my opinion. And I don't think the ending was all that bad. Just my opinion. Gameplay. Oh boy. So I personally enjoyed a lot of the gameplay up to a point. The combat feels punchy and satisfying, but feels totally unbalanced in both its overall difficulty and within the level design. I actually felt like the game was at its best when you were inside one of the science facilities or the medical labs or, wherever you were. I felt like the interior sections were actually at its strongest, even though those levels really aren't designed very well either. I'm constantly frustrated with clunky mechanics that you sort of encounter throughout the levels, one of which being the polymer. There's a few times where I actually got stuck inside of the polymer because there was an enemy who saw me while I was inside and started attacking me, and trying to get out and readjust and sort of re-level yourself to fight this thing was so clunky and hard to use that I could have kind of just done without the polymer altogether. I get it, and it creates, sort of a dynamic throughout a room or a hallway or a level, but I just was not a huge fan of it. But even more so than the damn polymer, I swear, the Dying Light first-person climbing mechanics. I cannot stand these things. That's just me. These are clunky, dated, and bring the gameplay to a total halt, in my opinion. I have strong opinions about the climbing sections. I just don't feel like they're necessary in a first person game. They're not all over the place, but there's more than I would have liked. I am so tired of getting stopped by locked doors. You can't go through here. You have to get something to get through here, but you can't get that thing until you get something else, and then come back, give the door that thing, just to be told you have to go get something else and repeat that process. And then after all of that, you end up in a boss fight that is essentially shoot the guy a lot while avoiding his bad guy friends. It stops the progress and really drags in the opening sections of the game, which is not a great look early on, in my opinion. But of any of the issues that I had with those sort of interior sections, at some point you get to the open world. Now, when you get to the open world area, it's exciting. The game doesn't give it to you for a while. I think I had 6 hours in the game before I got there. And I felt like any frustrations that I had with this kind of opening section, maybe they won't be applicable to the open world section, or maybe some things will get corrected, or maybe it'll just make up for it in some way. Wrong. It only gets worse. So though the open world sections are equally breathtaking to look at, the level design is just awful. It's just terrible. Maybe I just need to get good, but I felt like trying to navigate through these open world sections without running into any issues, sneaking around all the robots and the cameras, you should be able to do that. And I could not figure out how to navigate these open world areas. I felt like they just litter the entire landscape of this open world section with enemies, and it's kind of hard to navigate them without running into trouble. I'm so tired of the cameras. I gotta tell you, I brought up BioShock at the beginning of this video. One of my least favorite parts about BioShock is the damn cameras that send in the robots to come flying at you. The exact same mechanic is in this game, and it's more annoying in this game. I don't know why anyone thought this was a good idea. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's a personal preference. And maybe I'm just not very good at sneaking around, which is also definitely a possibility. But I just couldn't help but feel like I got out into the open world and then found that I really just didn't want to do anything. It was really hard for me to keep playing the game at that point. But I did. I don't really have a whole lot to say about the open world other than I feel like it's really not fun. And I hate to say that. It's really fun to look at, and sometimes when you're exploring, you go into somebody's house or you find a building and you look around and there are like notes that you can read about what happened there, and some of that is kind of cool. But overall, it was actually kind of a struggle to keep playing at that point. And I hate to say that because I was really excited about the open world sections of this game. It seems so impossible to me to navigate through these open world sections. I felt like everywhere you look, you're about to walk into another enemy or another camera. Like, I don't think that they really gave the player a whole lot of options in terms of, sneaking around. I think you're just kind of destined to fail in these sections. And maybe I just need to get good. That's a possibility. But I just felt like it was really unbalanced, and they were more concerned with just filling the world with enemies opposed to making it a fun space to navigate. And all of that, I think, would be okay if the combat wasn't so clunky and the difficulty wasn't so unbalanced. Like, every time you get into a fight with these robots in the open world, you're not just fighting one of them. You're getting swarmed by... It's overwhelming, and you don't pick up enough damn ammo to be able to handle this every, 5-10 minutes, but that's kind of what happened, at least for me. I had a really hard time adjusting to this section of the game. And so those are just my personal gripes. I think there's probably a lot of people who might like this. It's just, for me, I couldn't help but feel like it was difficult to navigate, and it feels like wasted potential because the world is so interesting. I would have much rather you put fewer enemies and maybe fewer cameras in the world so that we had more of an opportunity to explore. I just didn't like that I had to deal with these kind of clunky mechanics every 5 minutes. Just want to quickly note that the sound design in this game is excellent. All of the sound effects and the atmospheric sounds and the environmental sounds are really, really good. The worst part about the sound design in this game, to me, is just the vocal performances for the characters, which is a bummer, but I just wanted to point that out. It's worth noting. Overall, I feel like Atomic Heart is a pretty good first game for a studio. For Munfish's first project, it's pretty awesome. I just don't think it actually sits very well within the AAA space. There are better first person shooters out there. I'll just say it. There are better first person shooters out there. But the aesthetic of this game is stunning, but it just feels like style over substance for the most part. And that's really hard, because I was really excited for this game, and I think a lot of us were. And there's so much about this game that is interesting. It doesn't grab. It doesn't have the it factor. And I know I'm spending a lot of time sort of griping about what some people might find to be non-issues. I think that this game isn't undeserving of your time. I just think that there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be put into it to kind of bring it up to pace. It's still an action-packed first-person shooter set in a really cool world. I wouldn't write it off completely, just maybe not right now. Let's wait a little while, let's see how the patches come through, let's see what gets fixed, what doesn't. Maybe there will be DLC in the future, depending on, how Munfish feels about the response to it. But look, at the end of the day, these are just my personal opinions about the game. I'm just rambling about my kind of initial impressions of everything as I went through. Don't let me tell you what you can and can't enjoy. I think there are a lot of people who are going to enjoy this. So definitely, like I said, it's free on Game Pass. I didn't pay for it other than my Game Pass description. So definitely jump in, give it a try for yourself, because you might feel differently about it. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on Atomic Heart. Please let me know in the comments what you think about the game, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, if maybe I'm being a little too hard on the climbing mechanics. I know there's a lot that I didn't cover in the video. I'm kind of brand new to this. This is my first video on the channel, so let me know what I could do better, how I can improve, and I hope you guys had a good time, and thanks for hanging out with me. My name is Walker with GameBad, and I'll see you on the next one.